Now I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Senator Janice Bowling, District 16, Tullahoma, Tennessee. Welcome, Senator Bowling.
Good morning. I could just say amen and we could all get another cookie and leave and have a grand time, because everything that has been said this morning resonates in my heart, in my spirit, in my soul. And this is the reason that we're all gathered here, because we do recognize there are many directions and many ways to get, but there is one common goal that we all have to attain, and that is a choice of access to high-speed, affordable broadband in our rural communities and small towns. Now, I'm going to speak mostly to that because I am senator in 7 rural counties. And in one of my counties, a good friend always said, Janice, if there's a problem, there is a solution. If there's no solution, there's no problem. Folks, I'm here to tell you, as an ambassador from 7 rural counties, that there is a problem, and there is the lack of affordable access to this high-speed broadband, this essential utility of the 21st century. But I've got about 5 to 8 minutes to tell you about 20 years' worth of experience and observation. So all I can say is put your seatbelts on. I'm going to give you my little perspective. You've heard some of the overviews, but I want you to hear what I have observed in these rural counties, in southern Middle Tennessee in particular. Back in the 90s, I was a district director in a congressional office. I had 11 rural counties. And back then, I was able to be almost out on my own in the car, because at that time, there were no cell phones in that area. There were pagers. And finally, the Washington office says, we've got to give Miss Bowling a pager. We've got to know where she is and what she's doing and be able to get in touch with her immediately. So they gave me a pager. But of course, pagers don't work without cell towers. And so I had a pager, and that was the solution to their problem, they thought. But actually, that was just another problem. When I could pick up a signal, and I did get the page, then I had to go find a landline somewhere and ask someone, could I please make a long-distance phone call? Now, folks, I'm talking about in the middle 90s, and that sounds like ancient history compared to the way we live our lives today. But that was the reality of rural Tennessee. Fast forward to 1999, when the General Assembly in Tennessee, and at that time, most of the representation was from rural counties, because that's where the population density was. And the rural people in Tennessee were saying, we're not getting adequate cable channels. And so the General Assembly looked and said, you know what? We need to allow the municipal electric providers to also provide cable TV, broadband, and telephone. And they can bundle this, and they can provide it in their communities. But the thing that was done in order to get that passed, and it was more about a want, more about a desire, more about cable TV access, because still in 1999, the internet, some of us weren't sure if it was going to go the way of the CB radio. Remember CB radios? You know, this might be a passing fad. We don't want to get too much invested in this, because who knows, this www business, what's it all about anyway? And so we thought, well, this is a quality of life, and because we need people to have some quality of life, even if they live in rural areas, we need this infrastructure availability, which was not being provided in the rural areas. We have no quarrel with business models that don't allow them to go into sparsely populated areas to provide this. We understand that. But we also understand as elected officials that we need to make certain that the infrastructure for connectivity to the real world is available in the rural counties and small towns. So in 1999, here we're on the cusp of going into the 21st century, and there's so much to think about and so much to do, and they passed that law, but one regulatory restriction came along with that law. It said that municipal electric providers could provide this service, but they were restricted to the footprint of their electric utility provision. And that seemed reasonable, kind of, sort of. But it was still going to leave people outside of these mid-sized communities in the dark with regard to certain utility and infrastructure needs. Then came 2000. I was an alderman all this time in the city of Tullahoma as well. Now, Tullahoma's a little bit unique. We're a little over an hour from here, and Andy has gone, but I would say, Andy, we are also a gigabit city of 18,000. Now, how did we get to that point? I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you that as well. In the year 2001, some of our city leaders decided that we needed to take advantage of that 1999 legislation because in Tullahoma, my neighbors are literally and figuratively rocket scientists. They work at Arnold Engineering Development Complex. They are world-renowned scientists. They are people who have invented procedures and found answers to questions that I couldn't even imagine exist. But these people have done it out of a sense of patriotism, and it is the free world's largest ground test facility with the highest capability there. We knew we needed to be connected. But in 2001, I was beginning to see that, we are on the cusp of something. And this internet business, I think it is around to stay. But some of the things that have been happening through the 1990s and the coaxial cable and the other things. And if we're going to invest as a community, I'm concerned that we're investing in the 20th century technology. There's something that's about to happen. And I remembered when our older son was required to get a Texas Instrument calculator for his math class back in the 80s, and it cost $70. Now, $70 in the 80s was a lot of money. And it's a lot of money now to my kids, but still, back then, that was a lot of money. Just a couple of years later, our daughter was required to get the same calculator, and it cost $1.50 at the Walmart checkout, because technology had allowed that to progress at such a rapid rate. So I thought, I'm concerned that there will be too much exposure, risk exposure for our people who will invest in this infrastructure. Because contrary to what people say, this isn't tax dollars competing with private business. This is public dollars, the people themselves making an investment that is owned by the consumer. My husband and I are part owners of LightTube, which is what we eventually got in Tullahoma, because that is an infrastructure that we knew we had to invest in as a community. So when we looked at that, though, I voted against Tullahoma Utility going into the broadband provision because I thought there's something better that's just right down the road. And sure enough, a lot of men in the community, my name was not very highly esteemed for a while. They were really upset with me because they saw that we needed it. But it would have been a coaxial cable, and it would have been buried in the ground, and it would have been very expensive to upgrade. But just a few years later, when no one else had decided to come into our community, when they saw our need was real to help us, we decided, you know what? In rural communities and small towns, we know how to form cooperations. We know how to have telephone co-ops. We know how to have farm co-ops. We know how to have broadband co-ops. And that's exactly what we did with our utility system. But by 2006, as we were doing our due diligence, and I was on the utility board at that time as well as being an alderman, we really researched the issue. And we felt like the gold standard now was fiber to the premise. And so the same men that were very upset with me for voting against the coaxial were so pleased that we ended up with fiber. Because you can upgrade the fiber with the flick of the switch. You can do things with fiber that we don't even know. And as we were talking just now, and I can reiterate all those things, but you heard what Beth said and you heard what Deb said about the fact that real estate, medicine, manufacturing, government provisions of fire protection, police protection, all of these basic needs in every community, these things are dependent now on the essential utility of the 21st century, which is high-speed broadband. Fortunately, in Tullahoma, we did get the Gigabit city status just about a year ago, and we're so pleased with that because that shows that as a community of 18,000, we have grown with our jobs at twice the rate of other communities our size in the state of Tennessee over the last year. We are providing good jobs, good paying jobs. We're providing things that would not be available to our town if we were not able to be there. Then I became a senator in 2012. And lo and behold, here I go into my 7 counties and find out that they are behind the curve, just as Tullahoma had been in 2006, 2007. And last February, I received a phone call from a gentleman who said, the county mayor said, I need to call you, Miss Bowling. We are going to we're making a development in one of your rural counties, in Marion County. But now as we're trying to sell lots in a world-class retirement community, we're finding out that no one is really as interested as they could be because we can't guarantee high-speed broadband access. And I said, you know, I probably could cobble together some legislation, which has to be dropped by Tuesday, by the way. And he called on a Friday afternoon. I returned the call first thing Saturday morning. I said, can you get this, and this information by Monday? And I'll do this, and this, and we'll get some legislation together. But if you would not mind, I would prefer that the legislation be more systemic rather than particular to your need, because this is a systemic problem in rural Tennessee. And I explained to him what was going on. And he said very graciously, oh, I would be glad. I had no idea. Living in Chattanooga, I thought everybody had access to high-speed broadband internet. So when we got busy and got this legislation, little did I know that it would not be met with open arms by everyone, but I found out on Tuesday that it was not. But this is the misinformation that's out there. This is not to compete. This is not competing where something is not being provided. This is in order to make a provision in rural communities in small towns and mid-sized towns who have to have this essential utility of the 21st century, not only to thrive, but to survive. That's where we had found ourselves in Tullahoma. That's where we realized that all of America is going, because just as things have progressed so much from that beeper, that pager that wouldn't work because there were no cell towers, I'm proud to tell you that I was in that part of the state just about a couple of months ago, and now you can get cell service in about 50% of that area. So I wouldn't have been hidden entirely now, but this is 15, almost 20 years later. If it were going to be provided, it could have been provided. Right now, we've got to solve the problem for rural Tennessee, for small town Tennessee. But at a meeting this past July in Dallas, Texas, I was talking with legislators from across the country. And this is not just a Tennessee problem. This is an American problem. This is systemic across rural communities and small towns. I feel a strong responsibility. I have an ability to do something. And if you have an ability, you do have a corresponding responsibility. I cannot sit silent and not speak out on behalf of all of the jobs that won't happen, of all of the medical discoveries that won't be made. If we're being held hostage to 20th century technology and 20th century business plans, then we as rural communities and small towns in particular are just going to dry up and blow away. We are the heart and soul of America. We're the heart and soul of Tennessee. I think everyone in this room would agree that we all have to work together because there is a problem. And one aspect of the solution in Tennessee would be to reopen the legislation of 1999 and remove that regulatory restriction that allows the people to provide it, but only within the constraint of their electric footprint. Because EPB could go into Marion County, could go into Bradley County, could go out and could light up the world of these surrounding neighbors and these friends. The same way with Tullahoma. Right outside the city limits of Tullahoma was supposed to be a joint industrial park with Manchester and Coffee County. Well, folks, let me tell you, if you have an industrial park that has water and sewer and roads, you have an electrified cow pasture with water and sewer and roads. Because if you don't have high-speed broadband access, you don't have an industrial park. You don't have industrial recruitment. You don't have state-of-the-art medicine. You don't have the reliability to resell the real estate that's already there, much less go into these new high-end developments for retirement couples. If you don't have access to high-speed broadband, the essential utility of the 21st century, we would be like rural America was back when in 1937 they passed the Rural Electrification Act, which did allow that essential utility to go into these rural areas. And so now we're looking at the essential utility of the 21st century, We've got to make it affordable. We've got to make it available. And people say, well, what will it bring to you? And the good answer to that is, I have no idea. Because I don't think anybody in this room has any idea. Even as we speak, there are increases in the application of high-speed broadband that we have not even dreamed of. This is something that has to be cut loose in America. We have to enter into 21st century technology. My bill would have allowed for 100 megs symmetrical. And people said, 100 megs symmetrical, oh, that's way excessive. I said, no, that's capacity. There's a difference in excess and a difference in capacity. We've got to have that. We've got to have the ability for everyone to have it. My bill was going to be quite restrictive, and I look back on that and I thought that was the solution, but actually I would confess to you today that that might have been part of the problem, because it was going to have so many regulatory restrictions in it that it had to be in a county that was contiguous. I was trying to bend over backwards to show this is not competition, this is collaboration. But that didn't seem to work. And I thought, you know what? That's actually a good thing that it didn't work. Because now I think what needs to work is just to remove the restriction of the electric footprint. And so the electric municipalities, the electric membership cooperatives, anybody that needs to provide accessible high-speed broadband will not be encumbered by unnecessary regulations. We will free up that market. We will allow business in rural Tennessee and in small-town Tennessee. Thank you so much for being here and that you care enough to be part of the solution. This is something that is critical to my district, but I know it's critical to all of rural Tennessee and all of rural America. Thank you so much.